Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Doctor to Doctor in the chat room. I am so glad to have you back with me today. As I start each show now, I ask that you please remember to get tested. If you have not, check with your local health departments and get the information on where you need to go to get tested. Use those necessary precautions to stay safe, like wearing your mask. We want to make sure that everybody is safe. Changing systemic racism in America, I believe, starts with each individual. And I know and believe that every person, every culture has to be willing to unlearn and relearn ideals and philosophies that they've held on to, that have isolated and ridiculed others based on something so minute as their skin tone. And I think we're going to have to take the time to examine our past and try to understand how we got to where we are, even if it means going to a place of discomfort. And I've been saying the past couple of months as I've featured race relations in America that it's going to start, the change process is going to start with having conversations. And that's why we are here again today to talk about it. And who better to talk about it with other than diversity trainer and human rights activist, Miss Jane Elliott. I am so happy to have you here. I think it's safe to say that your name and your work rings throughout the nation. But for those rare few that may not know who you are, please tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
Well, I'm the third grade teacher, first rate third grade teacher, in my opinion, who separated her students according to the color of their eyes the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in an attempt to allow them to walk in the shoes of a child of color in the United States of America for one day. Now, I couldn't replicate what happens to children of color every day. That's not possible. But I did want my third graders to know a little bit about how it felt to be abused on the basis of a physical characteristic over which they had absolutely no control. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated the day before, and he had been one of our heroes of the month in February, along with George Washington, who owned slaves, bought and sold people for money.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln, who refused to free the slaves, and whom we found out just recently, we were told that Abraham Lincoln was a Melungeon. He was part black, part white, and part Cherokee Indian. Now, we didn't learn that when we were in school, but we did learn that he had long, long arms and long, long legs and was very, very strong. And
Mm-hmm.
we looked at his face and we looked at his hair, and we knew that didn't look like the ordinary white person. And now we find out that he wasn't the ordinary white person. He was an absolutely remarkable human being, one of our heroes of the month in February, along with, unfortunately, Daniel Boone, who took over Native Americans' land and killed those who stood in his way, and Davy Crockett, who died as we tried to take over Mexico's land. He died in the Alamo. So that those people, I didn't tell the truth about those people because I wouldn't have dared at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I should have told the truth about them, but we were afraid. I was afraid to, because you had to follow the standard elementary curriculum. And then here comes Martin Luther King being killed. And at that moment, I decided that I wasn't going to follow the standard elementary curriculum the day after he was killed. There was no way I could do that. We had planned to learn the Sioux Indian prayer. Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins. I decided, while I was ironing the teepee that my previous third graders had made on the living room floor and watching this ungodly horror on television. And today, I hear that C.T. Vivian died this morning. Now, do you know who C.T. Vivian is?
Oh, man.
Oh my God. Look up C.T. Vivian. He was one of the giants, one of the black giants of this country that we don't remember because he just was against violence, and he was just a fine human being. You've got to, we've lost another giant. Anyway, I was watching television that night and I heard those white commentators say things to leaders of the black community like, when our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line? And I thought, why in the world would someone say something so insensitive? JFK wasn't the leader only of white people. He was the leader of everyone in this country. So I changed the channel. And there was another one of them saying to three leaders of the Black community, don't you Negroes think you should feel sympathy for us white people because we can't feel the anger at this killing that you Negroes can? And I thought, sweet Jesus, how could they not feel the anger at the killing of a man who was only interested and working for making life better for all of us, whose life was all about hope? And for me, after Martin Luther King Jr., after I realized who Martin Luther King Jr. was while we were living in Waterloo, Iowa, and during the beginning of the civil rights movement, for me, Martin Luther King Jr. and the symbol hope, hope was an acronym for holding on to positive energy. That's what he did. So I went into my classroom the next morning. First student in the room, Stephen Armstrong, said, hey, Elliot, they shot that king last night. Why'd they shoot that king? I said, we're going to talk about that, Stephen. So after we had done the things you have to do first thing in the morning, first we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag with the words God, under God in it, which do not belong there and weren't there until Eisenhower bowed and scraped and allowed the Knights of Columbus to lobby their congressmen to get the words under God inserted into the pledge. Doesn't belong there, still doesn't. We said that. And then we sang God Bless America, which is a prayer, but it's a good song to sing in the morning. And so we sang that. And then we started talk about the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. And I asked my third graders, 1968, April 5th, what they knew about Blacks. And they knew every negative stereotype I had ever heard about Blacks. They didn't know one positive stereotype. And I finally asked them, how do you kids know these things are true? And they almost in a chorus said, because my dad said so. Fathers, be careful what you say around your children. They will come to school to somebody like me, and that instructor will know exactly what you're all about. Watch your mouths. I
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely dumbfounded. These kids had never been in the presence of a person of color. I finally said, look, do you kids have any idea how it would feel to be treated unfairly on the basis of the color of your skin? No. Would you like no? Yeah, yeah. I said, would you like to have an experience? Would you like to experience that today? Would you like to do something today that will help you know that? Yeah, yeah. It was like we've already gotten out of spelling and handwriting. Keep this broad talking. We don't have to learn anything all day long. I
Yeah.
said, okay. Yeah, you've done it. We've all done it. I said, okay, today we're going to judge people on the basis of the color of their eyes. And since I'm blue-eyed, and most of the students in this room are blue-eyed. Blue-eyed people are going to be on the bottom the first day. They said, what do you mean? I said, I mean blue-eyed people aren't as smart as brown-eyed people. They aren't as clean as brown-eyed people. They aren't as civilized as brown-eyed people. You give blue-eyed people something nice, and what do they do with it? And immediately one of them said, they just wreck it. They tear it up. They don't take good care of things. And I thought, oh my good Lord, how do these kids know how to say that? At that point, little brown-eyed Debbie sitting in the front row looked up at me and said, how come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes? And I thought, good Lord, there it is. That's how it works. This 9-year-old girl now feels perfectly confident to challenge her teacher because of a physical characteristic over which neither of us has any control.
Yeah.
And then Alan Moss in the back row stood up and said, Debbie, if she didn't have them blue eyes, she'd be either the principal or the superintendent. They're both brown-eyed. And I thought, there it is again. These kids know how racism works. They
Yeah.
know how because we defend white people's behavior in the very way that Alan was defending my behavior. It
Mm-hmm.
was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what happened in my classroom that day. I made the blue-eyed people take their desks and go to the back of the room. The brown-eyed people got to sit in the front rows. It was I watched 4 brown-eyed boys who are dyslexic, who couldn't read or spell the day before, read words I knew they couldn't read and spell words I knew they couldn't spell. And they could because suddenly I gave them magic eyes.
Wow.
I gave them something that made them smart. I thought this can't be happening. On the other hand, I watched Carol, the Lutheran minister's daughter. She came into my classroom in February reading at the 6th grade level. Now, for a third grader, that's pretty high power.
Yeah.
She had never multiplied. I taught her how to multiply the first 15 minutes of math class. She never made a mistake in multiplication again until the day she had the wrong color eyes. And on that day, that tall, blonde, pale-faced, perfect American girl, supposedly perfect American girl, walked with her shoulders hunched as if a ward off an expected blow. She stumbled when she crossed the classroom. She made mistakes in reading. She made mistakes in spelling, and she forgot how to multiply.
Wow.
It sounds like 1984. It sounds like I'm making it up. I'm not making it up. I wouldn't. If somebody had told me that that would happen, I wouldn't have believed it. She came in from recess crying, and I said, "What's going on here?" As she walked across the playground, two brown-eyed Debbies and a brown-eyed Cindy stepped up behind her. One of them reached up, struck her across the back with her forearm, and when Carol turned around, Debbie said to her, "Now you have to apologize to me for getting in my way because I'm better than you are." And Carol apologized and came into the room crying. Now, that would never have happened in my classroom if I had not introduced racism based on eye color into my classroom.
Hmm.
And the kinds of confrontations that we see between people of color and pale faces in this color country would never have happened if we had not deliberately introduced racism to this country and practiced it until this day. Nobody is born a racist. Those kids weren't born hating people with the wrong color eyes. I taught them how, and they learned it quickly because they've already learned how to behave that way, but based on skin color in their home, in their church, where Jesus is a blonde man, is a like pale faced man, and Mary is blonde, blue eyed, and has pale skin,
Yeah.
even though she's a Jewess in the Middle East.
Yeah.
We learn it in the movies. We learn it on, oh mercy, we learn it on television every single day. I was absolutely astounded. I went down to the teacher's lounge. I was going to stop the exercise at noon because too many ugly things were happening. I went down to the teacher's lounge to share with the other two third grade teachers what was happening in my classroom. I went into the lounge. There were a number of teachers there, including the other two third grade teachers, one of whom was probably 52 or 53 at the time, and the other was over 60 and had been molding young minds in that area for years. And I told them what was happening in my classroom the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. When I finished talking, the younger of the two third grade teachers said, "I don't know how you have time for all that extra stuff. It's all I can do to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic." Well, I didn't think she had taught reading, writing, and arithmetic yet, but I knew, and I know to this day, that she didn't teach the three R's of rights, respect, and responsibility because I took my son out of her class because she didn't teach those three R's. The other teacher said, and there were a number of teachers in there, and the 62-year-old teacher said, "I don't know why you're doing that. I thought it was about time somebody shot that son of a bitch." And I thought, she didn't say that. She could. And the rest of those teachers, not one of those teachers said, "Helen, God is love." Not one of them. They're all church goers.
Yeah.
Not one of them said, "Insomuch as ye have done it unto one of these, my brethren, so have ye done it unto me." Not one of them said, "Judge not that you be not judged." Every one of those other so called teachers smiled or laughed and nodded because she had expressed their feelings perfectly. And as the most senior member of the group, she had the most right to do so. I went back to my classroom determined that no student or person of any age will ever leave my presence with those attitudes unchallenged. I may not be able to change your attitude, but I can challenge your attitude.
Yeah.
And if you are going to make racist remarks like that, I am going to confront you for it. I will not say uh-huh and walk away. I don't laugh when black jokes are told, and I don't walk away, and I don't just stand there. I say, "Are you sure you want to tell that joke? Because if you do, I'm going to make you feel bad."
Yeah.
You need to know that what you're doing is blatantly racist, and
Yeah.
I've done that with my family. So now and for the last 52 years, ever since I did that exercise, I have been socially distanced, whether I wanted to be or not. People, I am not particularly welcome anywhere because it's common practice in Northeast Iowa to tell black jokes
Yeah.
and Norwegian jokes
Hmm.
and all kinds of ugly jokes.
Hmm.
Now, I don't mind if you tell Irish jokes because I'm Irish and I know that we Irish people are pretty funny. However, we don't tell the same kind of Irish jokes that we tell black jokes.
Right.
And I won't tolerate, I don't have to tolerate it. And people don't want me around because they're sure they will slip and say something racist because they are so accustomed to doing that.
It's ingrained.
So I did the exercise. The blue-eyed people are on the bottom the first day. I went home that night. I was afraid to go home. I was sure there'd be a cross burning in my front yard. So I went to my mother, where my mother lived, and I told her what had gone on. And she said her reaction to what I'd learned was, "Jane, you better be careful. You don't want to end up where Aunt Eunice did." I said, "Where'd Aunt Eunice end up?" "In a mental institution." You see, what I described to her sounded insane. But what I described to her was I had created a microcosm of society in a third grade classroom. And what my third graders did that day are what people in this country have been doing ever since Mr. Trump became the president.
Yeah.
We were getting along, we were coming along, and we were making some progress
Mm-hmm.
in destroying racism.
Mm-hmm.
And then this fool gets elected to the presidency and makes racist jokes, sexist, says horrible sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric things on a daily basis. And when I turn on the television now and I watch what's going on, I think, my God, this is what happened in my third grade classroom in 1968.
Yeah.
I didn't think we would go back to this. So
Yeah.
I went home finally and told my husband what had happened. He said, "Well, you're probably going to lose your job." I said, "It's a possibility." On Monday, I went back into the classroom, had some unpleasant experiences over the weekend, went back to the classroom on Monday, scared to death of what those blue-eyed kids were going to do to the brown-eyed kids, because they had said in the restroom, "We're going to get even with them when it's our turn to be on top." The blue-eyed kids were much less vicious to the brown-eyed kids than the brown-eyed kids had been to them. And on Tuesday, we wrote 4-paragraph compositions anyway, and then we got in the magic circle, and I said, "Now I need to know, you blue-eyed boys said you were going to get even with the brown-eyed kids when you got on top. Why didn't you do that? You're much nicer to them than they were to you." And those kids said to me, I found out how it feels to be treated that way, and I didn't want to make anybody feel the way I was treated when I was on the bottom. Now, white folks, particularly liberal white women, say to me, "Aren't those people going to want to get even when they get power?" And I remember those little white kids. And
Yeah.
I think the blue eyed kids didn't want to get even because they had learned something very valuable. They had learned how ugly it is to be treated that way, and how much you don't like it, and how much you can't trust the people who did it to you.
Yeah.
A woman at the Houston, University of Houston, a year or so ago, Angela Davis and I were were the speaker. And this woman, and they had introduced me, and I told them what I do. And this woman, white woman, sitting in the first or second row, said, "Aren't if they get power, aren't they going to want to get even with us?" I said, "Well, that's really fearsome for you, isn't it?" "Well, yeah, I'm afraid they're going to want to get even." I said, let's see if they do." 1,500 people in that auditorium, half of them were black. And I said, "Well, every person who in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the black race, who wants to get even with all white folks, please stand." 3 young black males stood, and the rest of them just looked at him like, "Are you nuts?" And I said, "See, they don't want to get even with all of us." And this woman looked like, "Okay." I said, "Now, let's be honest about this, however. Will every black person in this room who would like to get even with 1 or 2 white people, please stand?" They all leaped to their feet, cheering and laughing and high-fiving one another. "Yeah, yeah, yeah." They were just absolutely delighted. And I said, "You see, they don't want to get even with all of us, but every one of them wants to get even with 1 or 2. Now, if you want to be treated fairly in the future, just behave in a way that you won't be one of the 1 or 2 they want to get even with. Does that make sense to you?" And the black kids had cheered, and she went, "Okay." And I thought, "You simple woman, get over it. You need to realize that once you've been mistreated in that fashion, you aren't going to, if you're a human being, you aren't going to want to make somebody suffer the way you did. The vast majority, well, 99 and 90, 99 and 44 100% of it, didn't want to get even with everybody. They wanted to get even with 1 or 2. And each one of them could have told me the names of
Mm.
the 2 they wanted to get even with. I talked to a woman yesterday one of these, and she's Hispanic. She came to this country when she was, I don't know, and anyway, went to school at the age of 7, was in second grade, and it came time that first morning to say the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag. And she stood the way the rest of the kids did, and the teacher said, "You don't say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag because you aren't a citizen. You aren't allowed to say the pledge. You go in the hall until we finish saying it." So every morning, that little 7-year-old girl had to go into the hall. When they'd start to say the pledge, she said the teacher would point at her and look at her, and she'd know enough to get up and go out into the hall. Well, the teacher got sick and couldn't come to school one day, and they had a substitute. And it came time to say the pledge, and she said, "I got up and started for the hall." And the substitute said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I can't say the pledge. The teacher says I'm not allowed to." And she said, the substitute got really upset and said, "You will say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag when I'm the substitute, because you are an American citizen as far as I'm concerned." So while that substitute was there, she said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And the teacher said, the substitute said, "I will talk to the principal." She talked to the principal. And when the other teacher came back, the little girl was allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag with the rest of the students. However, the worst part of this whole story is later on, they named the library after that teacher.
Yeah.
So she got reinforced. She got reinforced for
Yeah.
being ignorant
Yeah.
and for doing something ugly. She
Yes.
got away with it and she got rewarded for it.
Yes.
So since I did that blue eyed, brown eyed exercise, I learned things about people and I heard things from people that just shatter my confidence in liberty and justice for all.
Mm.
We don't have it. We don't have liberty and justice for all. And we better stop pretending that we do.
Yeah. I recently read an article. You did an interview with the New York Times, and
Right.
you expressed your disdain for the ease and the speed of the videos of showcasing the brutality against Black people. And you said, online, and you said that it can be a form of intimidation for Black men and their mothers. It kind of says this is what can happen to you if you don't follow.
I think it was absolutely necessary that they show what happened. Absolutely necessary.
Mhm,
Because white folks won't believe it until they see it.
mhm.
And then even after they see it, they don't really believe it.
Yeah. Why
But
do you think the
you
George
could you could show that.
Mhm.
What?
Why do you
You
think the
could show
case did, kind of move the needle a little and get people to talking more?
because people saw it and they couldn't deny it. And because there was that young woman holding what? Her telephone
Mhm.
and taking videoing what that man was doing. And that white man, that policeman, looked up at her, knowing she was doing the video,
Yeah.
and kept right on doing it until he was guaranteed that that man was dead. Now, there is no denying that it happened. There is no explaining that it happened. They realized that the man had committed no crime, nothing that he should have been treated badly for, and he certainly didn't do anything worth that he should have been killed for.
Right.
People of color, that is not something new in the lives of a whole lot of Black people in this country. I did a program in, I can't remember where, I know where, it doesn't matter, at a major university. And when all the participants were department heads and administrators, and they introduced me, and this white woman in the first or second row said, "Why do we have to talk about differences? We are more similar than we are different. Why don't we talk about similarities?" And I said, "I'll show you why we talk about differences." And I pointed to a tall white male in the audience, and I didn't have any idea who he was. And I said, "Will you come up here and stand beside me?" Well, yeah, he was glad to do that. So I pointed to an even taller Black female. "Will you come up and stand here beside me, please?" "Yes, of course." And she came up and stood beside me. And I said to these folks, hoping that they would pass the test, because these are department heads and administrators. I said, "Now we're going to talk about differences. You folks see any differences here?" And they're, "Oh, yeah." I say, "What's the first difference you notice?" The first difference they noticed was height. I said, "That's the first difference you notice." "Absolutely, yes." Well, of course, the 6'2" and 6'3" and 5'1". Yes, they noticed the difference in height, but I know that they noticed another difference sooner, but they wouldn't say it. So I asked the man if his height was important to him. "Not really." Did you earn it?" "No." "Does it give you power?" "Yeah." You're really powerful, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." So I said to the Black woman, "Is your height important to you?" "Yes, but there are other issues to deal with." I said, "We're going to deal with them. We will get to them." So her height doesn't give her power. His height gives him power. I said, "Do you see any other differences?" So they said, "Age. Age gives him power. But there are some other issues." Then they said, "Gender. Gender." I said, "Does the fact that you're male important to you?" "Yes." Did you earn it?" "No." "Does being male give you power?" "Yes." This Black female. "Does the fact that you're female give you power?" "No." But there, I said, They'll get to it eventually. So now we're on number 4. And I said, do you see any other differences here other than height, age, and gender? And somebody said color. I said, thank you very much. That's the first time anyone has said color, but are you talking about hair color or skin color? She said, skin color. And I said to this tall male, who obviously has more than 1 degree, is your skin color important to you? He said, I never have to think about it. And I thought, you silly, you should not have said that. You are going to regret that. I said, did you earn your skin color? No. Is it a physical characteristic over which you have no control? Yes. Does your skin color give you power? Yes. So I asked this black woman, is your skin color important to you? And she paused for a long moment. And then finally she said, I'm going to say something now that I've never said out loud before. I said, and that's because? She said, because I'm ashamed of it. I said, and that would be, and by then there was one tear slowly making its way down the left side of that black woman's face. She said, because I have 2 children. Both of them are girls. Both times when I was pregnant, I prayed that I wouldn't have a son. I said, and that's because, she said, because I didn't want to think about what he'd go through and what I'd have to go through when I lost him.
Yeah.
There wasn't a sound in that room. The only sound you heard was this spool on my life going, and I thought, cry you SOB. Do you realize what you just said for 4 times? And the rest of you, think of what you just did. You know, and I know that they saw color first.
Yeah.
But because we white folks don't want to admit that we see color because we don't know how to deal with it, but we don't want to associate with it, and we don't know how to respond to it, they avoided saying it to the very last one. That's the last difference they could think of. They flunked the test. Color should have been the first thing they said, because color was the first thing they saw. They certainly saw it before age. Give me a break. I finally said to the group, look, people, you don't understand Colin Kaepernick. He won't salute the flag. You're going to be able to remember that at the last sentence in the Star Spangled Banner is, oh, say, does that Star Spangled Banner yet wave, or the land of the free? And I pointed at this white male, and the home of the brave. We white folks are free. Black people have to be brave. And that black woman had to be brave in order to get up in the morning. There's a freedom that I have because of the ignorance about my skin color that brilliant black woman doesn't have. This is flat out wrong, and it needs to be fixed. And it can be fixed because there is no gene for racism. There's no gene for bigotry. Those are things you have to be carefully taught. And we carefully teach those things in the public, private, and parochial schools in this country on a daily basis. That's what I do, and that's why I'm angry.
Yeah. You've also stated that all white people are racist. In an interview that I heard recently. I want you to talk about that a little bit when we come back from break. We'll be right back on 94.7.
Okay, all right, okay.
And we are back on 94.7 FM, and I am still here with Miss Jane Elliott, and we're talking about race relations in America. I've heard you say that all white people are racist. Explain what you mean by that.
If you graduated from high school in the United States of America and you aren't a racist, you weren't listening. Because that is what the standard program is, how to be a good so-called American. And we teach lies on a daily basis. We deliberately teach that there is more than one race of people on the face of the earth, and the people, all the important things that have been accomplished, practically every one of them in the United States of America, those accomplishments were all done by white males. Now, you cannot teach that nonsense and not end up having children or adults who leave the classroom racist, because they're quite convinced that everything that was important that was done in this country was done by white males. You have to realize that we don't teach that Abraham Lincoln was a Melungeon. because that would mean we would have to say that here was our first black president. Barack Obama wasn't our first black president. Abraham Lincoln was our first black president, and then came Dwight Eisenhower, who had black in his background. But so do all of us have black in our backgrounds. The only reason my skin isn't the color of your skin is because my ancient forebears moved farther from the equator than yours did and ended up in Ireland instead of where I doubt that you're from Ireland.
No, no.
Thank you very much. But you see, that's the only reason for the difference in skin color is our body's adaptation over the centuries to the amount of sunlight that we're exposed to. You have to realize that this is, I wear a shirt on which it says, God created one race, the human race. Human beings created racism. Human beings deliberately created racism during the Spanish Inquisition. And if you think I'm lying about that, if you think I don't know what I'm talking about, and oftentimes I don't, but this is the way it is. Read the book, The Myth of Race by Robert Wald Sussman, and you'll find out that Torquemada and company made up the idea of race because they found out that they had killed a bunch of Christians because they were trying to make everybody Catholic. They killed a bunch of people who they thought weren't Christians and then found out later that they were Christians. You can't tell what a person's religion is by looking at them. So they had to figure out another way to decide to identify those who could be killed without any repercussions. So they set upon skin color. Now, until that time, people of different color were all over the place, but it wasn't seen as a negative. But after that, it was seen as a negative. And for between 500 and 600 years, we have believed that it's all right to kill those who are people of color because they are less human than we are. Well, we need to realize that we're all members of the same race. And I would say that, I don't know how long I'm going to be talking to you, but you're going to hear that at least 20 times. Because if you got something you want to sell, if you want to sell a product, you have to advertise it at least 4 times because people have to see it at least 4 times before they'll buy it. So I'm going to keep on saying there's only one race, the human race. You and I are 30th to 50th cousins. You may not like that, but that's the way it is. You and I and every other person on the face of the earth came from the same ancestors back there between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. Now let's get over it.
I love being able to say that I'm related to Jane Elliott, in fact. So when
Well,
I
you're stuck with it, whether you like it or not.
so when I think about the experiment, the exercise that you did in your classroom,
Yeah.
um, so it is so that people can learn racism. We get that. Can they unlearn it? I would say it's safe to say that they can unlearn it.
That's what the exercise is for. And that's what it did for my 3rd graders. And it did that every year. And it did that for the junior high kids when I went up to teach junior high. I used it at the junior high level. And it did that, and it's done that for members of corporations that hired me to come in and do the exercise with their employees. And one corporation said it literally changed the way this corporation operates because our employees of color and our women and our members of the LGBTQ plus group say, if you care enough to spend the money and take the chance on having that woman come in here and do that, that says you care about us. Well, we care about this corporation. They said it changed the way people feel about the corporation itself.
Mhm.
You don't, you, you haven't really felt that you've accomplished something until the head of a major corporation has said to you, we're going to continue to do this for the next 3 years because this has made a difference in my life. After he sat and was blue-eyed. Unfortunately for him, he was blue-eyed, and I called him Bluey because I didn't realize who he was. The rest of all the employees sitting there knew who he was, and every time I'd land on him for something, they'd go like, mm-hmm. And finally, after we had done it, after we had done the exercise and they had written their essays, and it was time to get together, and we got in the magic circle, I said, now, folks, I just realized a few minutes ago who Bluey is. I said, I'll probably never come back to your corporation, but I've enjoyed the last 3 visits I've had with you. And he leaned clear forward in his chair and he said, Mrs. Elliott, you did exactly the right thing. I didn't want to treat any worse or any better than anybody else was. You did exactly the right thing. This workshop will continue for as long as we need it, and we will continue this. We continued that workshop for 3 years in that corporation. and it changed the way the corporation operated. It really did. And it changed the way the employees felt about the corporation. You
Yeah.
don't you don't go through that exercise as a blue-eyed white person and come away unchanged,
Uh-huh.
no matter how hard you try,
Yeah.
because I treat people in the blue-eyed group for an hour and a half the way we treat black people all day, every day.
Uh-huh.
There's no physical violence, and
Uh-huh.
there's none of the ugliness that you see in the workplace, but there is the joking. There are those jokes about how many blue-eyed people does it take to popcorn.
Uh-huh.
We tell those blue-eyed jokes that we have all heard about Norwegians and about blacks,
Uh-huh.
and all of a sudden blue-eyed people aren't amused by them anymore.
Yeah.
My father, the third year I did the exercise, it was filmed by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They sent me a copy of that. The second year, I'm sorry, they sent me a copy of that film, and I took it up to the folks' hotel and showed it to my mother and father. And after it was over, my 59-year-old father, whom I hadn't seen cry since his daughter died at the age of 3 when I was 10, he was a farmer, and he stood up, he took his red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his blue bib overalls. He blew his nose, he wiped his eyes, and he said, "I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old." I wish somebody had taught him that when he was 9 years old.
Yeah.
That would have meant that 50 years of his life, he wouldn't have had to act as though he believed or believe that he was superior because of the color of his skin.
Uh-huh.
He wouldn't have had to deny himself relationships with people who were different from himself.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have had to listen to ugly racist remarks made by his children and his friends and his family members, because that was the way you were supposed to be in those days. He wouldn't have had to put up with that. And maybe he wouldn't have had to learn it. He wouldn't have had to hear it. Totally changed the way he felt about black jokes. Aren't going to tell him here. He would just look at you like, is that going to, really going to believe that? And then he'd walk away. He wouldn't confront them. He'd just walk away. And my brothers and brothers-in-law would then realize that, oops, chains rubbed off on him.
Uh-huh.
And I had. So my brothers and brothers-in-law don't have a whole lot of time for me because I make them think before they speak,
Yeah.
and that's difficult.
Yeah. We've had a lot of things occur just kind of back to back to back. And I was watching Chris Cuomo one night on CNN, and he told a story of one of his African American friends asking him the question, why doesn't America love me? Why do you think America just does not embrace people of color? What do you think it's about?
Because we're ignorant. Because for over 500 years we have been told that it's all right to identify those who are white, and because we really think we are white. Now you look at my shirt. What color is my shirt?
Your shirt is white.
All right. And what color is my skin?
Your skin is
Ta-da!
white. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it white?
No.
No, it isn't white.
No.
This is not, this is not, this is white.
Yeah.
This is white. This is not white.
Yeah.
This is a shade of brown. Let me show you something. There are no white people on the face of the earth. We do not exist. Except in Tanzania, there is a large group of albinos, people who suffer from albinism. You ought to Google that, and you'll see what happens to albinos, people who suffer from being too white in that country in Africa. But look at this. These are pictures in the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018. All kinds of pictures whose you colored, all kinds of people of color whose colored skin color you can find on the Pantone color wheel. There isn't one person on this of these 70 who has skin this color,
No.
because human beings don't come in this color. You have to realize that this is the color of human beings, and we are all this color because we are all descendants of those first so-called black people who evolved in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. The word white has been used to describe us only since the Spanish Inquisition. And, and if it was years before that, I don't know of it, but it wasn't seen as a negative. The people who built the pyramids were not white.
Yeah.
We need to, and if you haven't read the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization
Ordered
by
it.
Anthony Browder.
You told me about it the other
What?
day. You told me about it the other day. I have it on order.
But good for you, because when you read that, if you have children or nieces and nephews or anybody younger, you're going to say, let me show you how fantastic we began,
Hmm.
how absolutely remarkable we are. You have to, before, if you don't get that, go to the library and check out this, the National Geographic for April of 2018. You see these two girls, they're sisters.
Hmm.
Do you
Well,
think they're biracial?
I would say that they are if I just at a
You
glance.
will never say it again. You
Hmm.
will never say it again, because if you think these two sisters are biracial, you must be convinced that one of their parents came from outer space.
Aha.
They didn't. Both of their parents came from planet Earth,
Yeah.
because there's only one race of people on
Human.
the face of the earth. And what?
I said the
Yeah,
human.
the human race.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. These are not biracial girls. These girls are mosaic. A mosaic is an art form that is new and beautiful and made of many different elements. So instead of saying biracial, let's say mosaic. We've got thousands, thousands, and thousands. 11% of the population of the United States is mosaic. 11% of the population of the United States. And 75% of the population of the earth is mosaic. 75%. Only 25% of the people living on this earth can classify themselves as white. And if they classify themselves as white, they're ignorant, because they aren't white. They are shades of brown, and so is everybody else.
Yeah. I'd like to read you a tweet. I just saw this tweet today. This tweet is from
Okay?
Candace Owens, and I'd just like to know your thoughts on it. Her tweet says, "Maybe I live in a box, but I've never met a single Black American who has a slave, who was a slave. I'm sorry, or a single white American who was a slave owner. I've only come across lazy people who believe that those of us who work ought to support them. Human parasites, and they come in every race."
You have no idea how absolutely appalled and disgusted and embarrassed I am by knowing that some white female was ignorant enough to write that tweet. I'm not surprised. I'm just absolutely, is this woman white?
This woman is Black. This is Candace Owens, one of the biggest Trump supporters, known Trump supporters.
Then Candace Owen has been brainwashed into believing the myth of the rightness of whiteness. And Candace Owen needs, if she has never met somebody who was a slave owner, evidently she has never met taxpayers in the United States of America who support the prison industrial system. She is, well, she and Clarence Thomas classify as Oreos, don't they? Black on the outside and white on the inside, no doubt about it. How dare she make such an absolutely illiterate statement? Perhaps she is indicative of the kind of person who would vote for Donosaurus T. Rump. How can she say that, in view of the fact that, in fact, if you look more carefully, more crimes per person are, more crimes are committed not by black people,
Right.
but by white people. More crimes, higher percentage of crimes.
Yep.
She needs to look at, oh my God, she needs to look at the fact that Bill Clinton started the strikes and you're out legislation, right? So they arrested a whole mess of young black males, literally thousands of them, because they committed that third transgression, and so off to prison they went. They're still there. But
Yeah.
three white males that were Donald Trump's buddies, Flynn, Manafort, what's the other one?
Uh,
Cohen,
Poet.
are
Hmm.
now, are now out of jail, out of prison, and they are on house arrest because he didn't want them to be exposed to coronavirus in the prison. They might get sick. All those black males are still in prison. She needs to take a look at that, and she needs to realize that those three men who are out and at home with their families pled guilty to some ugly crimes. They're out. How does she explain that? How does that foolish black woman explain that? And does she really think when some when some of Mr. Trump's friends walk up to her and say, "When I see you, I don't see you black," I'll bet that fool woman says, "Thank you so much. I'm so glad you haven't noticed that." The average black woman will say, "Well, I think you have an eye problem. Let's go down to the doctor and see if we can't get your eyes fixed." Oh, she is playing the game that she can't win at, because he will not be elected in November unless they cheat with the elections. He will not be reelected. And what will she do then? And how will she explain what that man allowed to happen in this country over the last 3.5 years, where people of color are concerned, where all of us are concerned, where the coronavirus is concerned? This need never have gotten to this point. I wish I could feel sorry for her, but I don't. I have nothing but contempt for her. But she has learned how to act white.
Yeah.
Good for her. She
Uh,
knows how to play the game. It's a losing game. She needs to know that.
yeah.
And furthermore, I talked to this woman today who said, I was talking about the fact that we discriminate against people from birth to death. We deliberately mistreat black and brown women in the delivery room. We treat them differently from the way they are treated than white women are treated in the delivery room. And I didn't know that until I worked with some people who deliver babies, some midwives.
Hmm.
And I was talking about that today, and this woman said, and I said, we discriminate against you from birth until after death, because there are cemeteries in the United States where black people can't be buried. And she said, yeah, all over the South. She said, I've been there. Absolutely, I've been there. There are places in this country where if you're black, you can't be buried in the local cemetery. Now, I wonder what this person who wrote that disgusting display of ignorance is going to say when she plans for where she's going to be buried.
Wow.
She better plan on being buried in the black cemetery, because whether or not she knows it, people see her black.
No doubt about it.
Even though she talks white, but people see her black. And there are people just who would express the same feelings that she has. Would she appreciate those coming out of a white mouth about black people? I think she would. I think she'd nod and say, yes, I agree with you. That's the way it is.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Seen it done. I've seen it done. I mean, she's all over the media. She's a huge Trump supporter. She's very public about that, and she's very public about how she feels about black people. Her disdain for black people. Yeah.
What? How does she get through the day?
Oh, I don't know.
That's amazing. Well, I realize that there are black people who have to play the game in order to 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 not have the name. They'll play the game. I know that, and
Hmm.
I know that if you can pass, you will. You know that, and I know that. However, it's one thing to pass. It's one thing to go along. It's quite another thing to attack the people who are in your color group because of their color.
Yeah.
Does she hate herself?
I don't have the answer to
When
that.
she looks in the mirror, well, when she looks in the mirror, what does she see?
Obviously not a black woman.
Well, that's a pretty good trick, isn't it?
That is.
See, that's just, to me, that is absolutely, it's one thing to think it, another thing to behave as though you believe it, but to write that kind of nonsense for public consumption.
Yeah.
I wonder if she has children and if they believe the way she does.
She does not
And I
have,
wonder what her parents,
she is married to a white man.
but she doesn't see him white because she doesn't see color.
That's a very good point. That is a very
And what color do you suppose he sees her?
well
And
good.
you see, she's going along to get along and has gone way over the deep end, off the deep end.
Mm-hmm.
And the time will come, without a doubt, when she'll have to look in the mirror and say, "Oh my God."
Yeah. It plays out, no doubt. I've seen it too many times. So yeah, you're right.
But
You talked
to be
about
foolish enough to write it, go on.
you talked about President Trump probably not winning this election. What if he did? What do you think is going to happen if he does win? What do you think will happen if he doesn't? There is going to be a
Well,
time between November and January, and I have concerns about if he were to lose, what's going to happen from November until January when someone else takes office.
he's going, unless I'm very much mistaken, and I hope I'm not, he's going to lose.
Yeah.
And he's going to slink away with his tail between his legs like any other beaten dog does.
Hmm.
And he's going to have no choice. And the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives have no choice but to put in place the person who is elected, not the person who was selected the way Mr. Trump was.
Yeah.
He wasn't elected. He didn't get the majority of the vote. Mrs. What's her name? Clinton did. Isn't that her name? Sorry about that. But he didn't. He didn't win that election. The only reason he is where he is because 4 electoral colleges in the United States, the members of those electoral colleges didn't know what the electoral college was for. And it was put in the Constitution to guarantee that no person who was unfit for that job would ever get that job. And the people in 4 states didn't realize what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to elect or name the person who was fit for the job. And we all knew that Trump wasn't fit for that job. And if you thought he was, he has proven to us beyond a shadow of a doubt that he wasn't fit for that job and doesn't belong there. But we are in the situation we're in because nobody trained the electoral college members. Now, in November, in January, I hope they train the electoral college members and say to them, you must not put a person in the presidency who isn't fit for the job.
Hmm.
And he's running and he's not fit for the job, so they don't dare write his name in this time. People will vote for him. There's not a doubt about it
Yeah.
because he's like this black woman and in that ignorance.
Hmm.
They'll vote for him because they don't know any better. They really don't know any better. And the members of the Klan will vote for him, and the members of Posse Comitatus will vote for him, and the members of the Order will vote for him, and some of the women who are daughters of the American Revolution will vote for him, because they don't want to admit that they made a mistake 4 years ago, and they did. They made a horrible mistake. We must not let that happen again.
Yeah.
However, if you haven't read Robert Reich's book, The System, Who Rigged It and How We Fix It, you need to get it and read it, because then you'll realize that the Business Roundtable could buy his way into the presidency a second time, because he is good for people with lots of money. He lowers their income taxes and makes them less responsible for the things that happen in this country. So he's good for them. He's not worth a damn for the rest of us.
COVID-19 has killed thousands of Americans, and it's known to be more susceptible to Black people. And that's said because it's certain underlying conditions that Black people have. Do you believe that there could be even a direct correlation between COVID-19 and racism?
No, no, racists aren't that smart. No, no, that's not what's going on. And a virus isn't smart at all.
Hmm.
So this virus is like when I was a kid, it was polio. My folks wouldn't take us to town
Hmm.
because we might get polio. So we didn't go to town. People were getting polio in town, and several people did, and my folks knew enough to stay away.
Hmm.
We would have many fewer people dying and being impacted by this if we would just not listen to the president. If we would just follow what the CDC tells us to do and not listen to the president, we would lose a lot fewer people. Because if you would wear the mask, if you'd wash your hands, if you'd stay out of big crowds, if you stay at home as much as you can, we would have a lot fewer deaths because of the COVID virus. So
Mhm.
this isn't racism, this is ignorance.
Mhm.
This is what you get when you get a leader who isn't fit to lead because he doesn't know how to lead.
Yeah.
And if he had jumped on this thing immediately, instead of saying, like a miracle, it's just going to go away. I'll never forget that. Like a miracle, it's going to go away. And I thought, wait a minute, fool. Swine flu didn't just go away. Polio didn't just go away. Smallpox didn't just go away. Diphtheria didn't just go away. None of these communicable diseases just went away. None of these viruses just go away. If you don't treat them carefully, and if you aren't very, very careful, you are the ones who will go away. And
Yeah.
he is so proud of not wearing a mask. Well, why would he? He gets tested every morning. The rest of us tested at taxpayer expense.
Mhm.
The rest of us can't afford to get tested every morning, and we have to get up and go to work. We have to work with people who may be carrying, but not everybody has not everybody is where they can get tested, and not everybody can afford to get to where they can get tested, but he can.
Yeah.
Look at it. Here he is. Here he is in that situation telling the rest of us not to wear masks because it makes you look weak. Well, then if wearing a mask makes you look weak, maybe he should wear a mask because he certainly looks weak now. Maybe the mask would make him look more powerful.
Or
It
say,
would make him look
or
more
say,
intelligent.
if we would stop testing so much, there wouldn't be so many cases.
Oh my God. Oh yes, that's oh yeah. We just stopped testing so often, we wouldn't have as many, we wouldn't find as many cases, and then we could. Oh, that when he said that, I fell out laughing. I thought, finally, he has said something so ignorant that nobody can possibly listen to him again. And then here come these governors, these Republican governors, saying, no, you cannot mandate in your community that people have to wear masks. You
Yeah.
can't do that. That has to come from the governor. And I'm not going to do that. And I'm thinking, oh, here we have all these Trump clones. I didn't know his father had been that active. I look at him and think, how could this be? Explain this to me.
Oh gosh, you did this blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in 1968. Is that right? And
Yep.
here we are in 2020, still having the same discussions, still having the same issues. Um, in that interview with the New York Times that I mentioned earlier, you said, and I quote, "When am I going to quit? When racists quit." You said, do I have a job for a lifetime? I'm afraid so. So basically, it's not going away, right? Racism.
When racists quit, I'll quit. It
Yeah.
could go away. It was on its way to going away. When Barack Obama was elected, I thought, now I don't have to do this exercise anymore, and I don't have to talk about it anymore because now people have proven that they don't believe in the myth of race, and I can relax and retire just like everybody else does. So immediately, Mitch McConnell decided that Barack Obama, number one, wasn't going to get elected. He did. So then he said, he'll never be successful. He was, even though Mitch McConnell and company did everything they could to keep him from being successful. Then he said, he'll never get reelected. He was.
Yeah.
And once again, he had to strive to be successful against Mitch McConnell and company. So now, as a result of white people seeing a black man in their White House for 8 years, we
Uh-huh.
have a person who isn't fit to wipe Barack Obama's shoes.
Wow.
Make no mistake about that.
Yeah.
And it's all because white folks are frightened. White people are scared. They know the demographics of this country that say within 30 years, white people will be a numerical minority in this country. And they are scared to death of what's going to happen to them. They
Uh-huh.
don't know how to handle this. I can tell them how to handle it. Relax. Just relax.
Yeah.
Live a little. Realize that all these folks who are of different colors want the same things, in fact, that you do, which
Mhm.
is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mhm.
I think, is that what you want?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't care about life. My husband died 6.5 years ago. And, when you lose half of yourself, then you really, life isn't all that precious. However, if I'm going to be here, I want liberty and I want the pursuit of happiness. And I want it for everyone, not just for people who call themselves white and look like me, who will never be white. It isn't going to happen. It isn't possible. I want the same things for everybody else that I want for me. I want my half Saudi Arabian granddaughters, to be treated as fairly as my Irish granddaughter. Let me see, I have a couple of granddaughters who are Danish, I think, or Norwegian, something like that. I want them all treated equally well. I want my great grandson, who is half Hispanic, to be treated as well as my other great grandson, who isn't half Hispanic.
Mhm.
I want my grandchildren to be treated fairly because they live in a country that believes in liberty and justice for all. And if we don't believe in it, we better stop talking about it. And if we do believe in it, we make it available for everybody, not just for people who call themselves white.
Yeah. Um, do you have, as we move to a close, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Same old thing. Vote the right way in November and teach your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren that they all belong to the same race, the human race. There's only one race. You all belong to the same race. It's the human race. In the Bible, it talks about the family of man. It doesn't talk about the families of man. It talks about the family of man because we are all members of the family of man. You and I and every other person on the face of the earth. We are all related because we all have the same ancestor back there 300,000, 500,000 years ago. And that ancestor was black.
I am so glad that my family was here to share with me today. I thank you so much. I really just feel like I can't thank you enough. I am so glad that you guys are here sharing with us, and I hope that you will be back here with us again next Saturday at the same time on 94.7 FM. We'll see you then.